Today, I'm going to share with you what I ate on my 3-week plan to lose 10 pounds, including how I decided how many calories I needed to eat, and I'm going to give you my final weigh-in results for week 2. If this is the first time you've watched one of my videos, my name is Susanne. I'm 53 years old, and recently I have been sharing my weekly results as I try to lose 10 pounds in 3 weeks. So in my last video, I talked about how people feel like they are starving a lot of the time when they are cutting their calories or trying to lose weight. And so today I'm going to share how I set my calories so that I can lose weight and try to reach my goal of 10 pounds. So the way I went about this was basically Trainer Joe said to choose a number somewhere between 700 and 1,000 calories. So I decided that I was going to try to shoot for between 700 and 800 calories. And then from there, I would look at my results and see how I was doing. Now, what I found as I had set my calories this low was that it was pretty difficult for me to get down to around 700. I typically would fall in between around 800 to 850 calories per day. Sometimes I would go as high as like 900. So in the last video, I talked about how I needed to make sure that I was feeling hunger, that sometimes I was hungry because that is how we lose our extra weight. So what I would do for myself is I would gauge my level of hunger. Now, if I was just a little bit hungry, or maybe I was having a little bit of head hunger, then I could decide whether or not I really wanted to or needed to have a snack. But if I wasn't really quite that hungry, I would wait a little bit longer and I would try to get to a point to where I just knew I am really hungry at this point and it's time for me to have a meal. And you have to sort of decide for yourself where that line is. So a little bit of it is playing around with the calories and gauging your hunger and figuring out what's the lowest amount of calories you can eat before you start feeling like you're starving or you're going to binge. So for me, that landed at around 850 to 900 calories per day. And I found over the first and second week that I was getting pretty decent daily weight loss results from that number. So once I got through the first week and I saw that I was losing almost 3 pounds and I was around that calorie level, I knew that I was pretty close to the target. And that's how I determined it. Now, if there had been a point where I just wasn't losing or getting those daily results, then I would think about what I could do to shave off a few more calories. But I didn't really run into that the first or the second week. And so I pretty much stayed at that 850 calorie target. And then of course I maintained my cutoff at 7:30 p.m. Typically I would actually cut off around 6 p.m. before I went out for my walk. And then I would not eat again until the next morning. So every night I would cut off at that specific point in time. And after a couple hours, or maybe even right before bed, I would definitely start feeling some strong hunger pains. But I found drinking water and just relaxing, not trying to burn a lot of calories late at night, that helped me get through to bedtime, and then I would be able to go to sleep. And in the morning when I would wake up, I would be very happy with my results. So what did I actually eat during my first week or two of following this plan in order to lose weight? There is a list that Trainer Joe gave with his program. It is a pretty extensive list. However, bottom line, what it really entailed was a good portion of your calories would come from protein. A moderate amount of calories would come from fat sources. However, the fat would be quite a bit lower than the protein. And carbohydrates would be really low, usually consisting of vegetables and some fruit. You could have a couple other starchy carbs, which I never did indulge in because I find when I eat things like rice or beans at all, even if in moderation or in a little amount, it's harder for me to lose weight. So what I mostly stuck to was for breakfast, I would have 2 scrambled eggs. I would have a half a pack of guacamole, which is basically all avocados with some spices mixed in. And then I would have about a cup of fruit. And that would include either a half cup of strawberries and a half cup of blueberries. Sometimes it would include a half of a banana, but I would typically try to keep my fruit calories to around 50 calories per day. Now that is something different than I had done before. I typically was not including fruit with the first 30 pounds that I lost. I stayed away from fruit pretty much most of the time. And I wondered if I'd actually be able to lose weight if I did incorporate a little bit of fruit. But I found that having that little bit of fruit with my breakfast actually did not have a negative effect or impact on my weight loss. I was still losing weight. In fact, I was losing more weight than I did before when I wasn't eating any fruit at all. Not that I think the fruit helped me lose more weight. I'm just saying I don't think that fruit really is an issue as long as you're keeping it within a certain calorie target. For lunch, I would typically have a serving of 3 ounces of chicken. I would have chicken thigh, which is a little bit higher in fat, but I knew for me, chicken breast is just a little too dry. I knew I wouldn't stay on the plan, and so I did modify it just slightly and included skinless chicken thigh. And then I would add about 30 calories of a mayonnaise. I would always limit it to about 30 calories. And then I would mix that in with a little bit of arugula, tomato, onion, a little bit of olives, and sometimes some cucumber. I would basically mix it up in a bowl, the chicken, vegetables, and mayo together, shake it up, and then I would add quite a bit of salt to it. For dinner, I would again either have 2 eggs. Either I'd have them over easy or I would scramble them again. And then I would mix in some grilled mushrooms with a little bit of Pam spray in the pan. And I would grill the mushrooms up, salt them, mix them in with my eggs. Sometimes instead I would add a little bit of lean turkey breast, the deli slices, just maybe about 50 calories worth of that, mix it in with my eggs. And then that would give me a nice high protein dinner with some vegetables with it. And that's typically what I would eat for dinner. If I was hungry throughout the day, maybe in the morning between my breakfast and my lunch, I might have a half of a Quest protein bar, which was allowed on the plan. There are many different choices to pick from, and my favorite was the chocolate explosion, or anything with some type of chocolate chip or brownie or anything chocolatey was my favorite. I would split it in half, and that would usually get me through the morning. Also, what I might do is incorporate a 1/4 cup of nuts that were allowed on the plan. Instead, sometimes I would just do an 1/8 cup to keep it low because I'm always trying to keep the calories within my calorie target. I might include a little snack in the afternoon similar to the one in the morning if I found that I could not make it to dinner. One tactic that I tried that seemed to work pretty well for me was sometimes I would split my meals in half and eat them every 2 hours, and that way I'd only have to go 2 hours in between each meal, so that if I did get hungry between meals, I was going to be eating very soon, and it was a lot easier for me to stick to eating those foods. And that was pretty much what I ate the first and second week. At the beginning of the second week, end of the first week, I weighed in at 144.8. That was a weight loss of 2.9 pounds the first week. And then at the end of the second week, I weighed in at 141.4, a total of 3.4 pounds for the second week. So I was right on track for losing 10 pounds in 3 weeks. By the end of the second week, I had lost 6.3 pounds total. So I was very happy with the results. Clearly, the calories that I set and the foods that I was eating were working for me. And so I decided that I was just going to continue that on into the third week. Now, if you're interested in hearing my final results for the third week, you can go ahead and watch the video up here in the end screen as soon as it's available, or you can subscribe and you'll get notified when that video comes out. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this. Do you think it would be possible for you to lose 10 pounds in 3 weeks? Hopefully these videos are giving you a little bit of inspiration and motivation. I wish you the best of luck on your weight loss journey, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!